Okay, we're ready whenever you're ready.
All right. Everyone's ready. Call to order. Let's have a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bright?
Present.
Ms. Dickinson let me know she wasn't going to be able to join us. Ms. Clement?
Present.
Mr. Kapler?
Here.
And Mr. Stevie, he let me know also he was going to be out of town. So we do have a quorum though, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. That's great news. First item is to review and approve the September 17th legal action report and meeting minutes. We would need a motion to approve, a second, and then a vote. And there they are on the screen for everyone to see. This is one where I was absent, but if you guys recommend approving it, I will go with you.
Yes, I reviewed the minutes and I would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of 8/6/2021.
You mean 9/17?
Yes. How come? Oh, okay. Yeah, 9/17/21. Sorry.
Okay. There's a motion. Thank you, Carol. A motion to approve these 9/17 minutes. Is there a second?
I will second the motion.
I was hoping you would. I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. Third, is there an audience online this morning that would like to introduce themselves? Anyone who's not an applicant, or a board member, or a staff member? Okay, there is no audience. Number 4 is our first case. It's DRB 2118 TEP power poles on Silver Bell Road, a variance request. I would like to ask first for city staff to give the board a summary.
Yes,
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Roslyn. We have with us Roslyn Wells, our zoning administrator, and she's the one who's going to present the project.
Excellent.
Good morning, members of the DRB. And thank you for allowing me to speak to this morning. I'm not sure what to do about this echo. I keep getting a. We will do our best. Our case today is C-10-2108, which is the Board of Adjustment case number, DRB 2118. Tucson Electric Power pole relocation and modification. It's on Silver Bell Road, which is a designated scenic corridor. The applicant is proposing to both relocate and modify existing power poles and to add new poles and service lines above ground in the right-of-way along both sides of Silver Bell Road, which is designated as a scenic route. And the project area is between Gorey Road and El Camino del Cerro on Silver Bell Road. The applicant is requesting a variance to UDC section 5.3.9, which regulates the location of utilities on designated scenic routes. And specifically, they're asking to allow relocation and modifications of power poles above ground on a scenic route. And the second request is to allow new power poles and service lines to be installed above ground on a scenic route. And that is a general summary of the case. The code section, UDC section 5.3.9.a says all new utilities for development on private property and on public right-of-way along scenic routes shall be undergrounded. And specifically with the Board of Adjustment variances, the variances can be requested when there are unique physical circumstances that prevent conformance with code requirements. That's my general presentation for this morning. I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you for that overview. So just to set the expectation for the board, our purview is to evaluate whether we would recommend a variance and then the variance board decides for sure? Or what is our exact purview? So we're just going to give our recommendation, either up or down, for this request of a variance, and then it's going to be forwarded to the Board of Adjustments for the final decision.
And Roslyn, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the DRB can also make recommendations that would assist in mitigating any negative impacts that might occur.
Yes, they
Okay,
can
we
make,
can-
yes, they
we-
can make recommendations to that effect.
Okay, is that clear, DRB folks? Yes, Rosemary, your hand is up.
Yes, I have a question for Ms. Wells. So what is the reason for the variance? What is the reason the power lines can't be buried?
I'm going to leave that to the applicant
Okay.
to discuss in this presentation. Thank you.
Yep. Next, we do need to hear from the applicant because I'm sure we have lots of questions like Rosemary just started with. So whoever is going to present for TEP, we'll turn the screen over to you.
Your mic is off.
We need subtitles.
You're muted.
Your phone is muted too, Kevin.
All right, does that come through?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Audio running through my phone. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you and good morning. My name's Kevin O'Brien. I'm an environmental land use planner with TEP, and I will go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation. I appreciate the opportunity for to be heard on this matter of the Tucson Electric power line work on Silver Bell Road. The agenda for this presentation includes background information about why this project is needed, scenic route information pertaining to the City of Tucson UDC that Ruslan referenced. There's an overview of the project area and scope of work, as well as design elements speaking to the materials and landscaping plan. As background, TEP is planning to relocate overhead power lines and other equipment in support of a road widening and transportation improvement project along North Silver Bell Road. This is a voter-approved transportation project that's being designed and constructed in 3 phases. The current focus is on phase 2 from Gore Road to El Camino del Cerro, where TEP needs to complete the electric utility scope of work, the relocation effort, before the transportation project can proceed. In other words, we need to relocate our facilities and make room for the upcoming transportation work. Our work is planned to commence in first quarter of 2022. Silver Bell Road is classified as a scenic arterial street. I'll go ahead and run this that way. This will be better. As you can see here, from Gore Road to Camino del Cerro, Silver Bell Road is classified as a scenic arterial street per the City of Tucson Major Streets and Routes Plan. As such, it's subject to sections of the UDC. Again, as Ruslan mentioned, 5.3 pertains to the scenic corridor zone, and 5.3.9 pertains to utilities, where subsections A, I'll paraphrase, that new utilities be undergrounded, and subsection B specifies that while upgrades and reinforcements are allowed, to the extent that the total number of electrical circuits are not increased. So these are the 2 items that we're seeking a variance for, which I'll present some more information as follows. These overview slides present the alignment of the existing power line along Silver Bell Road, starting in the north, just north of El Camino del Cerro. The red line represents the existing power line that will be rebuilt, and this will continue south to a point just north of Sweetwater Drive. As you'll see, the blue line represents the relocation section. So just north of Sweetwater Drive, the existing power line is planned to transition from the west side of Silver Bell to the east side, and the new line will be constructed along the east side of Silver Bell, where the existing line, represented by the green line, will be removed. This continuing south, again, the blue line represents the relocated section that will be a new power line, and then the green line along the west side of Silver Bell will be removed. This will continue south past Neosha to a point just north of Gore Road, where you'll see on this image right, the relocation section will transition from the east side back to the west side, reconnect to the existing line that will continue south on Silver Bell. Now, to help illustrate this, we've prepared several visual simulations. The image left provides a photograph of current conditions, while the image right shows a rendering of designed future conditions. These can be thought of as a before and after picture, left and right. The design simulation also includes the footprint of the transportation project, including roadway lanes and the new pedestrian bike path. So this first simulation is located just north of El Camino del Cerro, looking southwesterly on Silver Bell. This black car here in the foreground is heading north on Silver Bell, where these cars on the right here, this black car and white car, are heading south. So you'll see the existing utility along the west side of Silver Bell, and the design future condition is similar, where this power line continues to stay on the west side, continues south along Silver Bell to a point just north of Sweetwater. Again, this simulation is similar to the last, represents the current conditions on the left, the design future conditions on the right, and this rendering shows the location where the power line will transition from the west side of Silver Bell across the opposite east side of the road, continuing south. This will open up the western portion of the road where the existing power line will be removed. And this is, again, to accommodate the road widening transportation scope of work associated with this location. The third simulation is, so this is just south of Sweetwater, north of Avenida Albor, taken from the east side of the road, looking back sort of west southwesterly on Silver Bell. This white car seen in the simulation is heading north on Silver Bell, the red car heading south. This simulation shows the existing conditions where the power line is located on the west side, and the designed plan is to remove that section of power line and then relocate and rebuild a new section here on the east side, which will be located immediately adjacent to the pedestrian bike path. This will be, again, opening up the west side of Silver Bell and relocating the utility to the east side. This will continue south on Silver Bell to a point just north of Gore. So this Kippy Trail seen with this front end of this blue car. This red car is heading north on Silver Bell. This simulation represents the location where the line will transition back across Silver Bell from the east on the right-hand side to the west on the left-hand side of the simulation. And this will then continue and reconnect to the existing line continuing south on Silver Bell. And the photo of the current conditions, these structures that are currently located on the west side will be removed. So this realignment, this scope of work pertains to the UDC section 5.3.9A, where we're relocating and keeping the line overhead as opposed to undergrounding. The second section here addresses 5.3.9B, where the number of circuits will technically increase. So in this example, you'll see the image left here, the distribution, which is underbuilt on the structure, will go from 3 wires. In this case, it shows an example of going from 3 wires to 1 wire. And this is an existing pole on Silver Bell. And with the reconfiguration of this project, the plan is to continue this 3-wire underbuilt configuration to a point north, as illustrated on these images. This image here in the middle is located south of Camino del Cerro, just north of Sweetwater, and the line will be coming south on Silver Bell, represented by this orange line, and then it'll transition to that 3-phase or 3-wire distribution, continuing south as represented by this purple line, and this will continue south along the new alignment, transition over with the same structures to the east side, continuing along the east side all the way to the point south, where it then transitions back and connects back to a point on the existing line. As noted, the existing utility along Silver Bell has 3 wires continuing to a point just north of Gore, just north of Pasita Sombra Chula. And so then the plan again is to just continue that 3-wire configuration with this new configuration all the way north. So thus increasing the number of wires from 1 to 3, and hence the variance for 5.3.9b. So there's several constraints to undergrounding electric utilities along Silver Bell Road that really prevent and limit the feasibility of underground construction. And 2 of those items are the significant archaeological resources present, as well as floodplain activity in the Santa Cruz River and tributary washes. This slide illustrates the area in purple is a proposed Silver Bell archaeological district, and it shows the high density and widespread presence of archaeological cultural resources in the area, which can be very problematic for undergrounding and trenching through. This area has a continuous early agricultural presence of sites along Silver Bell Road and within the Santa Cruz River floodplain. There's artifacts and burials that have a high likelihood of presence, which pose a risk to the resources as well as the project in terms of schedule and timeline. So TEP and project stakeholders have been working together and designed the overhead utility along Silver Bell Road to avoid the unnecessary impacts to these valuable archaeological resources. Working closely with Pima County and other stakeholders, the plan has been to retain the line overhead as opposed to undergrounding. The other constraint, as mentioned, is the floodplain activity. As you can see on this map, illustrated from the City of Tucson FEMA floodplain mapping, you have Gore Road to Camino del Cerro. It shows a pretty widespread presence of floodplain activity, which can potentially pose a problem for safety and reliability of undergrounding an electric utility through such an area of active floodplain potential scour and erosion. So for this reason, we've continued to maintain the line and design it as an overhead construction as opposed to undergrounding. So some items pertaining to the design elements, the existing conditions, the poles along Silver Bell are a mix of different material types. There's wood poles, there's steel poles, there's poles from different time periods, there's varying configurations of equipment, all as a function of just the evolution and maintenance of this line over time. And what we're proposing as part of this effort is a more consistent and uniform construction using a weathering steel pole structure. So in regards to materials, all the poles will be a weathering steel as illustrated in these photos. And this material is consistent not only with other utility structures throughout Tucson, but also with regards to different art installations in city right away. This Painted Hills Wash sign, for example, is on Silver Bell Road, as well as others throughout the city that really illustrate the use of that weathering steel material as material that's used in the right-of-ways throughout the city. In regards to landscaping, TP has been working collaboratively with the city and stakeholders to integrate the utility design with the existing native plant preservation plan and landscaping plan for the project. This was prepared by McGann and Associates, and TP, we have the data and plans from the city and have been working to integrate our utility structures into this plan so that ultimately the project as a whole will have a very uniform and cohesive appearance accented by the landscaping to be implemented post-project after the transportation scope is completed. So in closing, we've been working closely with the city as well as other stakeholders for the success of this project. We've worked collaboratively to develop an integrated project plan, and this planned work will greatly improve the safety, functionality, and aesthetics of Silver Bell overall. So this electric utility infrastructure is integrated with the transportation design. We're confident that it will achieve a more cohesive, a consistent, and ultimately a modernized Silver Bell Road corridor. And for this, we appreciate your support. It's been a pleasure working on this project with the city and stakeholders for quite some time, and I appreciate your time today and support of this project. So with that, I will transition back, stop sharing, and can open it up for questions and discussions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kevin. So that was an interesting presentation, DRB. And I guess I'll open it up to comments. And it looks like you already have your hand up. Rosemary, go ahead.
Yes, I do. So a couple of questions. First of all, it looks like the new corridor is a great improvement. There's pedestrian and bicycle path. And what's being done to make sure that that pathway is shaded with trees that don't conflict with TEP's power lines?
Well, that will be part of the landscaping plan, where that will be integrated with the design to help ensure that those trees don't grow in, or that they're maintained and trimmed over time so that they don't conflict with the utility.
So in locating new power poles, is it possible to push them out far enough so that they don't require trees to be, trimmed back in order to avoid conflict?
The current design has the structures located within the city right-of-way and the new right-of-way that's designated for the transportation project. And so the plan is to retain those structures within that right-of-way.
I guess I'd like to see what the landscape plan looks like, and how many trees there are. Does it provide a shade canopy to pedestrians? It just seems like a missed opportunity if that isn't incorporated into this new design.
Rosemary, that's a great mitigation strategy. I think we would like to see, as the design review board, we're reviewing the design. We'd like to see it underground. That would be the superior design. And you do have a pretty healthy rationale with the archaeological conflicts and stuff, right? So I think that one would be tough for us to negotiate, right, in this meeting. So if it's going to be above ground, we're on the right track with some mitigation strategies. Carol, your hand is up.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with what Rosemary is suggesting. I would like to go back and ask a few questions about the archaeological resources. Mr. Applicant, you said there were many stakeholders involved in this process, Pima County and others. Who were the others, if you could be more specific?
Yeah, so the Silver Bell Road Transportation Project is really beyond the purview of TEP, but it is a regional transportation authority project that's being planned and developed by the RTA. So there's the city of Tucson and Pima County and city of Marana, as well as the stakeholders, the public, as well, and tribal interests as well.
Well,
And,
that's what I'm interested. That's what I'm interested in. Are the tribal interests? Have they indeed agreed with the idea that there are too many important burial sites, artifact sites along that stretch that warrants the request for variance? I'm not hearing that anywhere.
From what I've heard, the concern is that if the utility were to be undergrounded, that project stakeholders such as the tribes and other members of the public, their position would potentially change in light of changed design. So were that too undergrounded, their position on the project as a whole could potentially change significantly.
So it sounds like to me you are choosing to keep the utilities above ground in order to not have to further explore the possibilities of undergrounding it because of potential issues that could come up.
The issues have been well documented. Ian Milliken with Pima County has been involved, and Pima County is actually overseeing a lot of the cultural monitoring and study work, and their input along with others has informed the design to keep it overhead integrated with the project.
I'll ask a question. Is there a sewer that runs along this same Silver Bell Road?
There is underground utility, including there's water and sewer, and the project being designed around those elements.
So water and sewer, are they going above or below grade?
The
gas?
existing
Gas? Is gas going on some poles too? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. It's the right of way, and there must be some underground utilities, so it must have been excavated before, unless it's undisturbed ground that you're worried about.
Yeah, that is the case. So the other utilities that you're referring to are typically located within and underneath the actual traveled way of the road itself, whereas the utilities are located on the margins and periphery of the roadway. And in this case, with the expansion of the transportation footprint, the utilities are relocated to an area that's currently undisturbed and thus would require more significant excavation as compared to, historic work in the roadway where the gas and water utilities.
Are they relocating the sewer, Kevin? Is that what you're saying?
Are they relocating the sewer? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the plans associated with the sewer scope of work. I don't believe so, but that's outside of my purview.
Well, I'm just curious if other utilities, by necessity, have to be underground in the right of way. Why then couldn't there be some sort of joint trench agreement and put the power line there too?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think, though they're certainly not going to relocate to the extent that TP needs to relocate along the entire length of the corridor. There may be isolated instances, but we're actually going to relocate our facilities, the electric poles, to work around the existing underground utilities. And
your power poles, how deep are those foundations generally when you auger the underground pier or the caisson? I'm curious.
They vary depending on the direct embeddedness or if they're on a foundation. And the area along the west side of the road, so we're relocating to the east side because that southern extent of Silver Bell from Sweetwater to Goree is more hilly. There's more topography on that west side. And if we were to retain those lines on that side or go underground, it'd be, significant amount of excavation and earthwork. So moving them onto the east side, helps alleviate major impacts to that west side of Silver Bell and avoids the need for earthwork and potentially retaining walls and such. So that's where that's been integrated with the design for the transportation project.
Well, the reason for asking is those poles usually have a underground foundation, which is a form of excavating anyways, although it's just in spots, right? And I don't know, you might have 100 poles in this project. How many utility poles are you thinking you would need for this particular project? Rough order of magnitude.
It's under 100, and Pima County is going to be supporting the cultural monitoring associated with that, and the installation of the poles are just isolated, discrete point locations, and that impact is going to be significantly less than if it were to be constructed as an underground utility. So therefore, yeah, the point location certainly much less impact.
How deep do you bury underground lines with this voltage typically?
They can be anywhere from 4 feet to, I believe some of the newer installations are like 10 to 12 feet.
4 feet sounds right. 10 to 12, that sounds pretty deep.
It is, yeah.
There just isn't going to be enough information for the three of us this morning to really sign off on, you got to go above ground. You guys have done a lot of work. Obviously, there is a force in place that really wants it to be above grade called economics. But this is the design review board, not the project budget review board, and that there's an appropriate board for that, I am sure. For a design review board and investing in a scenic route, if we're serious about a scenic route, we better keep it. We better do what we can to keep it scenic. And you have a trench that's not very wide that you would need, and not very deep that you would need. And I know it's going to be slow going with the monitor in place. And if you find something significant, it'd probably stop the whole project. So, I'm aware of that. And that may well be the rationale for the Board of Adjustments. But we're not right. We're thinking of mitigation and design right now.
Sure. Yeah, then that's valuable input to get your thoughts on it and your inputs to help ensure that the project is successful overall from a design standpoint, and it integrates with the landscaping plans and all of the planning that's been done on the transportation project to modernize Silver Bell Road and improve the aesthetics of it overall, as well as the safety and functionality of the transportation network and associated infrastructure in that area. So yeah, your input is valuable, and that's really why we're going through this process. In regards to the economics, the emphasis thus far has been on avoiding the impacts to the archaeological resources and avoiding constraints with other limitations like the floodplain interaction. And economics, as you saw in the presentation, is not a factor in the design considerations. And so it's been thus far an effort to avoid the impacts to the depth of rich resources that are throughout that area.
Okay, we have two hands up, but I'll start with Rosemary and go to Carol.
Thanks. So I was wondering, could you bring back up the exhibit? I wanted to see the cultural resources map again.
Yes, and as we transitioned over, my computer crashed. I'm running my audio through my phone. I do have
Maria might be able to put it up for you.
Yeah,
That would
let
be
me
great.
do that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you do
Maria.
have the presentation, so if you could do that, be very much appreciated. The joys of virtual meetings. My Teams, anytime my video is on, it just seems to crash.
There it is.
I think it was the one with the pink meandering line, I think was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember where Silver Bell Road is. It's in the center of the pink area. Is that correct?
That
Yeah,
is
it looks
correct.
like it's starting to look that way, yeah.
Okay. And then Maria, could you go to the floodplain map? Okay, so that again, Silver Bell Road, okay, is indicated, and it looks like the bulk of that activity is to the east of Silver Bell on this map.
Yeah, and that's the location where the line will be located on the east side of Silver Bell. It'll run, so from Sweetwater to Goree, to just a point just north of Goree. It'll be on the east side, and then it'll be running perpendicular to all of those tributary washes.
Okay, so I just want to say I agree with Nathan. We don't have all the information that we need. I think what we would need to know are, what is the depth at which the power lines would need to be buried if they were buried? How deep would the trench need to be? Could it be in a trench with the other utilities? All
Yeah,
of these
so on
things
that,
coming.
to
Yeah.
that point on the depth could range from 4 feet upwards of 12 feet. And there's no utilities that are trenching in along the same alignment that CP needs to construct a power line. So there is no trench for co-location, which can be a really efficient means of locating utilities. But in this case, since we're relocating along the entire extent of the transportation project, there is no common trench. And so we would need to construct new trench and new underground, which would be at a depth of anywhere from 4 to 12 feet.
Yeah, and Kevin, just to follow up, and then we'll get to Carol. Why are you going in a different location than the other utilities? For what reason?
All the other utilities just have different alignments, serving different points. They have different points of origin and termination. And it's just the nature of the system is that there's no common utility that would be reconstructed in the exact same footprint as TEP's infrastructure.
Yeah, because you're trying to blaze a new path. It seems like it would be great to have all utilities, at least the main lines of them, kind of lined up together. Carol, go ahead.
Yes, could we go to a frame showing the proposed perspective looking north or south? I'm trying to figure out which side is the multi-use path on. Oh, the back up. That would show me. Okay,
Yeah, that's
there's the multi-use path. Sidewalk runs along generally south, so that means it's on the east side. Am I understanding that correctly? Which side is the MUP on?
Yeah, if you can advance to the next simulation, just the next slide. That path, that is on the east. That's on the east side of Silver Bell. So that's looking.
Yeah, got you. Thank you. Along with what Nathan and Rosemary are suggesting, why can't it be undergrounded underneath the MUP? You know, I know the MUP isn't going down 4 feet for grading, but it's within the right of way. It's an area that's going to be disturbed anyway. So just a suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, that depth, it's just that path and the disturbance associated with it is not going to be at a depth similar to the utility depth.
Right. You know, I'm looking at this simulation, and that is a pretty stretch of road. When I drive that road going north, and I have that overview of the Catalinas to my right, to the east, it is very pretty. And now what you're proposing here is we're going to have poles on both sides.
No, in this case, we're removing the poles from the west side and relocating them on the east side.
But what is in this simulation that I'm looking at right now? It's showing poles on both sides.
Is that the crossing?
Well, those are
that's the
two luminaires light standards, like the street lights. So that's part of the city of Tucson design.
And where's and how are those light street lights? How are they powered? They're powered with an underground line, right? Or do they have aerial service to them?
Those are powered by utility for the dedicated lights. It's a different voltage than the sub-transmission voltage that's run on the lines themselves, like on the peak power poles.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't that be a shared trench? Yeah, maybe different power requirements, but the depth would probably be, the requirement would be the same. Why can't that be a shared trench?
That's a different configuration of a different system, and locating a utility voltage in a trench for a streetlight it's just two different systems, thus not necessarily compatible in design.
And that Kevin, the underground electric that is feeding the streetlights, that belongs to TDOT?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So, question, at the very least, why wouldn't you keep the power lines, why wouldn't you keep the poles away from the MUP? Why do they cross the street and then interfere with the pedestrian way?
Yeah, so they cross the street because that terrain on the west side, like in that image on the left side, you can see it's fairly hilly. And per the design, and this is going back, a year ago, and when the project was being designed from a transportation standpoint, the earthwork associated with the roadway design was going to have to be substantial unless TEP was able to relocate that line to the east. So we're basically moving those poles on the west to get out of the way of the transportation footprint. And if we were to keep them on the west, we would have to move them further west into that hilly section. And that would require a significant amount of dirt work and cutting into those hills and building retaining walls. And that impact aesthetically would have been more significant and substantial as compared to relocating onto the east side. And thereby we could the city, per the design, could retain that western topography.
Sounds like another argument for buried lines.
Kevin, is there a provision in these high voltage lines to have a more shallow trench if the duct bank is encased in concrete? So you wouldn't have to go your 12 feet. You could go some sort of minimal coverage, but you encase it in the red concrete to protect it.
That's an engineering question that I don't believe is an option on this, but I can yeah, I can't speak to that.
What's interesting is you're posing a design question, but it's really an engineering question. You know, this whole application is supposing that the engineers have thought through everything, and they may have, but they're not here.
Yeah, that's
I'd
right.
also like to see. I'd also like to see the archaeological report.
Yes.
They've probably done a sample, and what if the significant resources are 6 feet down? You know, who knows? And you guys can live within that zone on top of it. And the 80-20 rule would say you're only going to run into 20% of the conflicts, not 100%. Or maybe all the resources are in the first 6 feet, and you can do some sort of boring at a lower elevation. That sounds like it would be in the caliche level, but then we would want to see the soils report for that.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is this plan to retain the overhead utility, and the root of the variance request is a function of all of the design and engineering work. And so those engineering specifics in conjunction with the archaeological reviews that have been done primarily by Pima County in support of the transportation project, that has informed the current design. So the shallower trench encased in concrete or depth of trench for utilities, those have all been factored into the design and determined to be not feasible. Therefore, the design is an overhead design. And so those have all been vetted, and that's the reason for the overhead design. And the utility, along with the stakeholders, have determined that we couldn't design an underground utility without avoiding or impacting those cultural resources. So that research for the archaeological resources is substantial, and that has informed.
Nathan, could I ask a question? As part of your stakeholders, what are the neighbors, the people living in this immediate area? Have they been talked with? What are they saying?
Yeah, we held a neighborhood meeting, and there's been public outreach as well. And they've had just some questions about whether the lines could be relocated further east, or why the lines heading north of Camino del Cerro, why those aren't on the east side as well. Can they be moved to the east side? If there's up north of Sweetwater towards Camino del Cerro, there's residences on the west side, and some of those folks asked if the line could be moved from the west side of the street over to the east side. So there's been opportunity for public comment, and it's open for public comment through the Board of Adjustment hearing to solicit input from the public.
Thank you.
Now we got to start thinking about how we're going to, what our motion is going to be.
Right.
So our purview is like, do you recommend to the Board of Variance that this design go forward? If so, with what kind of mitigation factors? And I'm just jotting down my thought, and I'll share that with the group. I think that we don't have enough evidence or data to convince the design review board that the overhead is justified. With the presentation materials that we just reviewed, we still believe that the underground is the best design. And maybe we list our questions. But it's a pretty tall task for us to do in one meeting, cold turkey, I mean, a lot of people have probably put their best efforts into this design. I don't want to say they haven't. I know some very smart people have looked at it. And here we are on a Friday morning saying, you know, is this good? You know, is it good? What else can we do? I just think that if we want to be honest to ourselves as a design review board, we haven't been part of all that deliberation. We're looking at the cake after it's already been decorated and going, you know, it's not really the best design from our purview. I know there's a lot of pressure from the community for TEP to put their lines underground, and there's a lot of pressure from TEP to keep them above grade. You know, that's a built-in tension right there. But we don't have this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just you know, understanding that the data and the design, this, like as you mentioned, this is the culmination of years of planning between the city of Tucson, stakeholders, as well as TEP, and through that design process, including consideration of underground, including consideration of archaeological resources, the plan is, as we're seeing today, the overhead construction. It is an existing utility, so the plan involves maintaining that existing utility with just a modification and relocation, and then improvement also from the design side, an improvement in materials in terms of the cohesion and compatibility of all of the adjacent structures. So, I mean, there's some very positive design elements that I think, looking at the project overall in conjunction with the transportation improvement, I mean, really ultimately results in a net positive improvement for the Silver Bell corridor as part of this larger regional transportation improvement effort.
Do you have some sort of letter from the archaeology, the Arizona State Museum, recommending that you avoid excavation? There must be some sort of, you know, don't take my word for it. Here's what they're telling me, archaeologically wise, to stay away from digging in this area. Don't take my word for it. Here's flood control saying better not go underground. Or is that just TEP's opinion?
Nathan, I think the study was done by Southwest Archaeological Center. Did I catch that correctly? And I think any comments would be from them rather than the state historical. I mean, that the state historical site's probably referencing a study that was done ages ago by the Southwest Archaeological Center, if I am seeing the documents correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, and
But
that's
I agree with your idea of wanting some kind of statement. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and so we're working, that contract is being administered by Pima County and Ian Milliken. And so we're working in conjunction with Pima County in their archaeological studies and designing our facilities to get out of the way of the transportation scope per their design and per their input. And so that recommendation is part of a larger effort associated with the project.
Yeah.
And
So I've had my hand up for a while. I have a couple things to say. Number one, I agree with Nathan. We don't have all the information here to make an intelligent decision. And I do appreciate that you've been meeting with stakeholders. I appreciate that that TEP is looking at the design and trying to make it aesthetically pleasing. And I think that's fantastic. But that said, I feel like this may not be the best solution. And I just don't have the information to make that decision. I would like to see information on archaeological, like we discussed, soils report, engineering information that would tell us what it would look like if the lines were buried, what would the depth be? To Carol's point, could it be under the MUP? That would make it a lot easier to access whenever TEP needs to pull power for new construction. So I think all these questions need to be answered before we can make a recommendation.
Okay. Yeah,
Do you
that's,
think?
that's fair. I think, but keeping in mind that those are major design changes for a project that is designed and planned, and so proposing those as alternatives is really outside of the scope of review of the proposed project.
Well, if we say come back, we don't have enough information, come back with more information, that's one thing. I think that the real deciders are going to be the Board of Adjusters. And this is not the same presentation that you're using for the Board of Adjusters, is it?
They'll be modified for the particular board. So for this one, I wanted to include some of the elements pertaining to materials and landscaping, provide you all with the background information, but then also provide information pertinent to materials and those visual simulations. So for the Board of Adjustment, it'll likely include, information per what they require.
Well, I think when the Board of Adjustments get together, they're going to have to say, these are all the pros and these are all the cons of this variance, right? And then they're going to have to make a decision. And so the Design Review Board can say, aesthetically, that's a con, but it could be outweighed by the pros and the benefits of going above grade. So we can be honest with ourselves and say, no, we don't recommend it. From a design review perspective, we don't believe this is the best design.
Right.
But the engineering aspects and the archaeological aspects of it might win the day. And they can say, thank you very much. I know it's not the best design, but it's the best of all possible worlds. We got to go above. They can make that call. And if I was on that design, if I was on the Board of Adjustments, I might go that way. But right now, the hat that we're wearing is design review. And do we recommend above or below?
Yeah.
Given what we know.
Yeah. Do we recommend their request for variance?
A request for variance.
Right.
Well, do we recommend? So are we recommending the request for variance? Or are we recommending? We're making a recommendation to the Board of Adjustments. We're basically saying, dear Board of Adjustments, we looked at this and we think you should approve it. And then we go in the pro column.
Yeah.
I think if it's not an option to get more information and come back, my recommendation is going to be denial today.
I agree with Rosemary. That would be my.
Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, so the DRB has the third option of continuing this meeting, requesting applicant to come back with additional information. If that's the case, I could also try to arrange for the project manager from the Department of Transportation and Mobility be present, and our historic preservation officer who also oversees cultural resources.
That's a possibility, Maria, but let me ask this question to Kevin. How long has this project been in design?
For well over a year.
For well over a year. So I don't believe, I'm just at a high level, I don't believe that our board is going to digest that information and make a decision. I think it's fair enough for us to say we deny it in our purview. That's just one bullet point in the against column. They've got lots of bullet points in the for column. That's why the design after 1 year is as it is. But why would the design ever be better from an aesthetic point of view above grade?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the design, balancing all of the various factors on this site, the design is, balancing the other resources. The design is the best that it possibly can be, understanding that the preference is to keep it overhead to avoid the impact. Is the overhead design the best that it possibly can be? Are the materials agreeable? Is that weathering steel pole compatible with the local landscape? And are there any recommendations on landscaping that could help improve? So I think another consideration is just, if it has to be overhead to avoid those impacts, is it the best design that it can be? Or are there other recommendations to say, yes, keep it overhead, but consider other options like around landscaping to help mitigate the overhead relocation? And is it better than the current overhead? I mean, there's overhead there now. Is this new infrastructure going to be better than the existing overhead, which is already there? So in that regard, not a new.
Carol.
Yes, but that's the point. We do not have enough information to determine if it is the best it can be.
What we could do is say, design review board does not have enough information to recommend an above ground TEP design. We can recuse ourselves, so to speak, say the decision above or below is beyond the scope of what we can do. We can't. I don't want to give my permission to go above ground. The people that did give their recommendation spent a year thinking about this. So it's not fair for the three of us to spend a couple hours deliberating on it. So we should recuse ourselves of above or below. It's not, I don't want them to say, well, the design review board said that this design is great above, and they looked at it for 45 minutes on Friday. No, we should just say, we don't have enough information to recommend approval of the above ground TEP design. That being said, looking at the poles, we think the poles meet the expectation. The landscape, maybe we could talk about that. But the first part of our motion is, no, we're not giving approval or disapproval of the above grade because we don't have that information.
Yeah, and to go back to the first thing I said this morning, if we go that route, I think we need to make recommendations for a landscape plan that works with, if power poles are used, a landscape plan that does not conflict with the new power poles. There's no reason to plant trees under brand new power poles.
Yeah, and that would be great. I mean, we have a whole vegetation management group that has litany of compatible vegetation and can help inform that design element, and beyond working with the native plant preservation plan that we're working with. But no, I definitely appreciate the conundrum of not recommending the design per se, of saying we recommend this overhead design versus an underground design, as compared to approving the current design as specified as far as materials and landscaping. I understand that's quite a conundrum to have to digest, the overhead versus underground, but looking at it from the perspective of the overhead is the design being put forward as the variance. any input to that end around vegetation is greatly appreciated.
Mr. Chair, members of
Yes.
the board, if I might, I'd like to read to you the specific findings for approval of a variance, which as the design review board, you should keep in mind as you are continuing to explore the design elements. It says that the Board of Adjustment may approve a variance only if it finds, one, that because there are special circumstances applicable to the property, strict enforcement of the UDC will deprive the property of privileges enjoyed by other properties of the same classification in the same zoning district. The second item is that there are special circumstances that were not self-imposed or created by the owner or one in possession of the property. The next criteria is that the variance granted is subject to conditions that will assure that the adjustment authorized shall not constitute a grant of special privileges that would be inconsistent with limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone. The next item is that because there are special circumstances applicable to the property, including its size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings, the property cannot reasonably be developed in conformity with the provisions of the UDC. The fifth criteria is that the granting of the variance shall not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. The next item is that the proposed variance shall not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase congestion, or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. And the final criteria the board must consider to grant the variance is that the variance, if granted, is the minimum variance that will afford relief and is the least modification possible of the UDC provisions. The board must find the project to be in compliance with each and every one of the 7 findings.
Thank you for bringing that up. We were swirling around and around, and now we have sort of some guidance here. So maybe we should look at these 7 points and see how we land on each one of them. Number 1, special circumstances applicable to the property. Strict enforcement of the UDC will deprive such property of privileges enjoyed by the property. It can approve it because I don't think we're depriving any other property by going overhead.
Set maybe views, but you know, how do you determine that?
Right now there's overhead power, and then tomorrow there's overhead power.
Right, you're right, okay.
So let's go on. Number 2, such special circumstances are not self-imposed. And if the circumstances are archaeology and floodplain, I would agree they're not self-imposed, not created by TEP or anyone in possession of the property. Number 3, the variance granted is subject to such conditions as will assure that the adjustment authorized shall not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties. So is this a special privilege for power?
So it seems that way.
Who doesn't enjoy these special privileges?
So the special privilege would be the granting of the variance, correct? I mean, allowing power poles, allowing an exception for power poles, you know,
Right.
it's a precedent that will be set if that happens.
It's a special privilege because you know, wastewater has to go underground. They don't get this special privilege. Water doesn't get this special privilege. Southwest Gas doesn't get this special privilege.
And to be honest, I feel the special privilege is because they have not, I'm feeling TEP has not really fully explored other options. Maybe they have, like you say, but I don't have that information, such as the archaeological report that would help me. So,
yeah, and that extent is not we have explored, but then also the other project stakeholders have explored those items in depth.
If I were to receive the archaeology report that's about this thick,
yeah,
I would read the cover letter and see what, and I'm not Indiana Jones, so it seems that there should be some sort of executive summary of that archaeological report somewhere.
Sure.
Actually,
yeah, that can be
Go
provided.
go ahead.
Although that can be provided, that's certainly an item that can be provided as follow-up, as any of the reports, etc.
Okay, we're right on number 3, which is key for number 3 is special privilege. That's inconsistent with other properties, limitations on other properties. Number 4 is because of special circumstances on this property, which would include size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings, so which includes archaeological and flood control concerns. Property cannot be reasonably be developed in conformity with the scenic route UDC. And it may be that that term reasonable development, like it's not reasonable to start a whole new underground path in that archaeological zone. That may not be reasonable.
But there again, I feel like there's not enough information provided for us to feel comfortable allowing the variance, for me to feel comfortable to allow the variance.
Okay. Number 5, the variance shall not be detrimental to public welfare. So it won't be bad for the public to have these holes in the air.
Well, it is a designated scenic corridor, and this is where we are with it. And, you know, it is there. The views to the Catalinas driving north on that road are beautiful.
I always wonder if engineers and designers and builders of the future are going to put this underground anyways, and we just don't do it now. Why aren't we doing it now? If they're going to do it eventually, if the end game for electrical transmission is underground, and I don't know that it is.
Well, I think it might be, given our climate storm increases. You know, things are moving that way, Nathan. I see it. I'm watching it nationally, and it's moving that way.
And so I always think, well, if engineers of the future are going to look back and say, man, they spent all this time and effort, they should have just put it underground. You know, we're leaving a chore to somebody else. Right. I kind of think that, but that's not part of this.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. TEP's plan is not to underground this in the future, is to maintain it as an overhead utility corridor.
The future being 50 years or 20 years or 10 years?
For the foreseeable future, yeah, I think there's no immediate plans to underground.
So what would that be? 20 years? Foreseeable future?
Yeah, that's. I think there's really no specified time frame, but it's just that there's no utility with a future vision to underground where there's constraints, especially of this nature. So just in regards to that consideration of whether engineers of the future are going to underground it, think that consideration is something that TEP's plan is not to underground it, and especially in this location.
It seems like for wear and tear, that would be a consideration. Wouldn't it be more protected underground than it is out in the environment?
No, there's a lot of limitations, especially in these floodplain areas, that it's prone to scour and erosion. And then when the underground utilities do go down, the reliability and the repair times are much longer, and the maintenance is much longer and more complicated. So, and in regards to the storms, these are going to be self-supporting, very strong steel structures that are engineered and designed. So as the future has evolved, these steel structures have come into play as opposed to wood, because they're more durable and can withstand the forces of those storms. So therefore, it increases the reliability for all of the landowners in the whole area.
So number 5 is this variance should not be a detriment to the public. In the foreseeable, in the present moment, it would not be injurious to property owners in the neighborhood, I don't believe. Number 6.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Well, just 1 minute, please. Isn't the line, or is there an existing line in the northern portion? It looked like there was not, but there's going to be power poles and an overhead line added north of the interchange. Am I remembering that correctly?
No, this is all existing utility, the whole length of Silverbell. There's an existing power line. It's just being reconfigured to accommodate the transportation project. But there's an existing overhead utility the entire length of Silverbell through this project area.
Okay.
Let's see, we're on number 6. This variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air. I think that's fine. And it won't diminish property values. I couldn't say, but I don't think it would. Number 7, the variance, if it's granted, is the absolute minimum that they would need to get the relief, and is the least modification possible of the UDC provision. Well, it's sort of an all or nothing, isn't it? Is there any portion of this that can be underground, Kevin? No, it's all in the same. I mean, it's the same condition throughout. It's that pink zone of archaeological resources. So it is. Yeah.
That proposed archaeological district along Silverbell is very consistent across, as that pink map illustrated. The density and continuity of the archaeological resources are significant throughout the entire length of the project area.
Kevin, are you aware of other construction projects, utility projects that had a real negative experience in that zone?
Not in this zone along Silverbell, no.
I remember hearing stories of excavators finding amazing things along there and stopping projects and stuff like that. That might be nice to, this is a lesson learned from a previous project.
Nathan, I was working for Wheat Sharp Associates when the widening of I-10 was done up around Prince Road. There were major early farming excavation sites found along there, and when working closely with the archaeological group, they were able to identify them. Findings were taken out. The land was blessed, or whatever it was called, I can't quite remember, by the Tohono O'odham people who are caretakers of the old sites, and construction was delayed, but it did for not that long, and it was able to proceed after respect was given to the cultures.
Correct.
So there have been incidences where it has happened, it's delayed, but it's been dealt with in a good way.
There's so many competing priorities. Is it the view shed? Is it the archaeology? Is it the engineering, the flood? It's a very complex project. I will give it that. And the team spent a year and they came up with this above ground approach. And just because we say that we approve it doesn't mean it's going to get approved by the Board of Adjustments. And if we say we don't recommend it, that's not the final word either. The Board of Adjustments is, got their own. Is it the same? That's the criteria the Board of Adjustments uses, the same 7 that we just looked at. Is that right?
That is correct.
Russell?
That is correct, Nathan.
Okay.
Could we go back to that list again? Thank you.
Is there any in here of the 7 that we failed?
I kind of feel like number 3 is iffy for me. Like we've discussed, the other utilities are all buried, and without information about the depth at which the electrical line would need to be buried compared to the others, it's hard for me to say whether, whether this applies or not.
What if we asked for them to come back with an overlay of here's the power plan, here's the water and sewer plan, and whatever else, and we can see how they don't match up or whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a section through the roadway and what the utilities look like, the other utilities look like, and what it would look like if the electrical line were buried.
Yeah, so to that end, the depth is anywhere from 4 to 12 feet, and there is a set of plans included with the submission that is, and that's the City of Tucson plan set that includes all of the utilities in the area, in addition to the TEP infrastructure overlaid on the plans for the project. And so this will provide an illustration of all of the alignments of different utilities, as well as TP's alignment, where you'll see most of the utilities are going this way and that way, crossing at various intervals, or are in the roadway, where the unique nature of the electric utility is that it's going to parallel the right-of-way consistently for the length of the project. So that's a little bit different than some that may be in Silver Bell for a portion and then turn and go a different direction, or go west or east. And another note too is that that alignment for TP's electric utility is an old alignment that predates the city's acquisition of that, or annexation, I suppose, of that area. And so we're trying to adjust and make it as compatible with the transportation infrastructure of the future. And so
the profile plans, I would take a lot of time to read. Might you have it, the elevation profile, might you have an overlay in plan view of the utilities? That the profiles take looking at station numbers and all that. Is there something that might be a little more efficient for us to review.
Yeah, and right now we don't have all the other features for the utilities. This was prepared by the city with support from their engineers, and it includes a lot of utilities that we don't have the data for. But so something we can possibly develop and work. We can work with the city engineers to maybe create something to that effect. But I think the key point is that the alignment for our electric utility is quite different from the other utilities. So the opportunity to have a shared alignment really is something that doesn't exist.
Here's something I want to point out. I would like to hear from the other utilities what their scope of work is. What if we find out their scope of work is we got to trench along the right-of-way and put in a new sewer line? Then it's reasonable to expect that scope of work to happen for TEP as well. Or if the sewer goes, I'm all good, I don't have to do any trenching because I'm already there. Well, okay. But I
agree, Nathan. I'm getting more and more feeling that there has not been a studied approach to what coordination there might be possible with this project with other utilities. I think everybody's gone off by themselves instead of coming together and coordinating, looking at possibilities.
So let's continue and say bring back wastewater and Tucson Water. What's their scopes of work going to look like?
Or
they don't get the special privilege of going up in the air.
Right. And also maybe just the general approach of further study needs to be done in terms of the possibilities, the potential of coordination, shared trenches with other utilities. I don't think that's been explored here by TEP.
Let's ask for a report on the other utilities then.
Well, and Carol,
and also the archaeological. I think that's very important. Some kind of executive summary.
Right. And to address Kevin's point, it's possible that the electrical may not be able to share a trench, but I think, locating it buried under the MUP is a brilliant idea for a lot of reasons. If anything needs to be torn up, you're not tearing up the roadway, and it's just the pedestrian path that would temporarily suffer. So I feel like there's definitely some other options to look at.
Yeah, I think the alternatives, like under the NUP, that extent of that disturbance is going to be much shallower. And for coordination with other utilities, there's been weekly meetings and significant discussion. It's still regarding the alignment of other utilities. And so TEP has been adjusting our design to avoid other utilities like sewer. And there's really no common shared alignment that would make for an underground pathway that all utilities could be co-located in. That just is something that doesn't exist on Silver Bell Road. And so we've been meeting with other utilities and adjusting our locations so that we're not in conflict with their facilities. And so the plan set shows the location of our structures in an effort to avoid, conflicts with the city of Tucson transportation footprint, as well as the other utilities like sewer and fiber, et cetera.
Does fiber have to go underground, or is it planned to go above grade?
I believe it'll be a mix.
It'll be what?
It'll be a mix where some of the existing communications are co-located. They're on the structures.
Okay. I see Russellin has her hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to let the board know that this is scheduled to go to the Board of Adjustment on the last Wednesday of the month. And should you all request that they return, they would need to be able to provide the information you're seeking in time for you all to make a decision before the Board of Adjustment.
Well,
The
yeah,
board
Mr. Chair,
the board may choose to hear the case without a recommendation from the board, DRB.
yeah, the next DRB meeting is scheduled for Friday, October the 15th, 2 weeks from now. The last Wednesday of October is October 27th.
October 15th is a board meeting?
It's a DRB meeting.
Yeah, for us.
And Board of Adjustment is October 27th.
Well, would that be time? I mean, gosh, you guys, this is a tough one.
I think it would be nice to ask them to come back on the 15th and get our other DRB members caught up to speed. So that is a big recommendation. We got everyone's chance to vote on it. And then we asked for what's the scope of work for the other utilities?
Right, an overlay at scope of work for other utilities, and also the executive summary of the archaeological report for that section of Silver Bell.
There you go. There you go. So are you on board with that, Rosemary?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it studied as a possible underground utility under the MOU. Like, is there a reason we can't ask for that to be looked at?
Well, I would like that idea. I don't know. It just, how do we say that? I think all three of us have the feeling that other alternatives have not been fully explored. Other coordination with other utilities could use more exploration, or we need more information. I'm not sure, you guys. I'm not sure, but that's the thing.
Let's make a continuation and say we're not yet convinced. Please come back with the archaeology report and the summary, the flood control report and the summary recommendations, and come back with some sort of exhibit showing what the other utilities are doing with the same exact constraints, in the same exact right-of-ways. What are the other utilities doing? Question mark. And then we'll come back on the 15th. Hopefully we'll have our other members that are absent today. We'll have another discussion, and we might end up with a not recommend or a recommend. The Board of Adjustments is going to do whatever they're going to do. They don't need it. It sounds like they'll go without us. So we're just going to do the job that the city asked us to do.
Right.
And I think we need those three things.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, I just want to make sure that you're gonna, ask the applicant to come back, that he has everything you need. And I just want to make sure that you may want to include Mrs. Bright's request of bringing back the landscape plan. She wanted to make sure that there's no gonna be any conflicts with the landscaping and the above ground proposed pole location.
Okay. So we're going to ask for the archaeology summary, the flood control summary, the landscape plan, and an exhibit on the other utilities. What are they doing with the exact same constraints?
Yes, in plan view rather than profile.
Yeah, we want an exhibit that's easy for us to get the key points.
Profile's too laborious to figure out.
So I think that's what we're going to do. Does that need to be a motion, Maria, or just a comment back to the applicant?
It needs to be a motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I have a question. Can I ask? As TP is the applicant, but given the complexity of this project and the multiple stakeholders, including the City of Tucson, would the attendance of City of Tucson transportation engineers be beneficial to help inform some of the other elements? Because in coordination with the other utilities, for example, that's something that the city has been doing as part of this effort and TEP has been a part of, but would it be beneficial for the board to have input from City of Tucson engineers regarding those scopes of work and how they're interconnected and interrelated?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Carol or Rosemary, you want to take a shot at a motion?
Did you write it down, Nathan? I didn't write it down. Can you hold
You-
up what you wrote down up to the camera?
Oh man, you're not going to be able to read this.
Uh,
We want.
You can't make the motion? as
Can I make
chair?
a motion, Maria?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, the chair is capable of
Oh,
doing the motion.
well, I think I'll take a stab at it then.
Thank you.
The Design Review Board has reviewed the proposed scenic corridor zone modifications, reductions, and deletions, and recommends continuing this session, requesting the applicant to bring back with them the landscape plan, the archaeological report with a summary, the flood control report with a summary, and some sort of exhibit showing what other utilities, for example, wastewater, Tucson water, stormwater, gas, what they are doing in the same zone with the same restraints and challenges, so that we can evaluate if this variance request is a special privilege or not.
That was good, Nathan.
So that, I'll take that as a second. Carol just seconded it.
I second the motion.
I'll call for a vote. All in favor of going with this motion, say aye, raise your hand. Aye. Okay, have you got that, Maria? Were you able to write that down okay?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, applicant, for bringing such a challenging project for us to think about this morning.
Oh, I really appreciate it. I fully understand this. This is a complex integrated project, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time to contemplate it and consider it this morning. And then I think a continued session with some additional material for review will be helpful given the complexity of it. So I'll look forward to that. And then Maria, in the meantime, can I provide those summaries to you prior to the meeting for distribution?
Yes, please go ahead and make sure to CC Roslyn Wells.
Okay, will do.
And if you can provide me the name of the project manager from the Department of Transportation and Mobility that you've been working with. And
Yeah,
I will also
Kyle.
coordinate with our historic preservation officer.
Excellent, thank you so much. And yes, Kyle DeWitt is the project manager for the transportation side.
Yeah, just email it to me, please.
Okay, will do. Excellent. Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And
Thanks a lot.
Next session. And with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. I think y'all have a good day and a good weekend, and we'll look forward to continued discussion on the 15th.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Thanks.
you all. Thank you for your time.
All right,
Thank you,
agenda
Russell.
item number 5 is staff announcements, which is an informational agenda item. What do we have for staff announcements?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm going to just give you a heads up what's coming up your way. We have a solar carport being proposed on top of the parking garage of the Wells Fargo building in downtown. That needs DRB review, and also the conversion of an existing office space into a bar with facade modifications by the Chicago store building. And also I'm gonna start putting together we discussed at the last DRB meeting, Mr. Chair, a training session for the DRB regarding the recently adopted Sunshine Mile District. And that meeting will include the current DRB members, but also the 3 design professionals that will be involved in reviewing cases in the Sunshine Mile, and as applicable, different neighborhood association representatives will be part of the DRB reviews as cases come in, as specified in the Sunshine Mile. So it'll be a bigger meeting. At the last meeting, DRB members asked that is scheduled during a scheduled DRB date. But also, if we don't have other cases to review. So there's plenty of time for discussion.
Great.
And then Maria, if I could just add that you're going to be staying on top of that Tucson well site for the landscaping.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, at the last meeting, the DRB reviewed another Tucson water well, and so DRB member Clement requested an example of a project that has been completed. So the applicant provided an address, and we went ahead and researched the approved plans, and Ms. Clement went ahead and took a look at it, and irrigation had been installed, but not the plantings. So we've been in touch with.
Yeah, the project was slated to finish in August, but there's no plans. So we're just wondering, where is it at?
So this week
there.
This week I emailed Tucson Water. I'm waiting to hear back from them. If I don't hear back from them by next week, I'll bug them again.
Thank you, Maria.
Before we adjourn, I'm wondering if October 15th might be a challenge for DRB members. It is part of the fall break. And I was just trying to think of my schedule. I might be on the road on that day. So, and I know time is of the essence. If we want to get our recommendation in front of the Board of Adjustments, the other date that would be possible is the 22nd, which is another Friday. Comments, Rosemary or Carol?
Yeah, the 22nd is actually better for me too. The AIA State Conference is on the 15th, and I am probably going to be attending that, so I think the 22nd would work better for me as well.
22nd is good for me. And I think it'd be really great if we could get the other DRB members, everyone be here for this one. I know it might be hard, but.
Okay, I'll shoot an email to everybody and try to get the feedback from the other 2.
Great, thank you.
And,
Any other?
Excuse me, but if they can't, at least I know I have 3 members that can, so I'll go ahead and schedule it for the 22nd.
Any other announcements or comments from anyone in the group that you want to discuss?
It's nice working with you guys. Thank you.
Likewise.
That's nice. That's good to hear.
Likewise. Carol, thanks for checking on that well site. Thanks for going out and looking at it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I am not surprised that there were no plants and lots of weeds. I didn't even say that, but we'll see what they come up with. Benefit of the doubt.
And Maria, thanks for reminding us about the landscape plan too. I think that'll be an important part of the review for the 22nd.
No problem.
Yes.
Great. All right, we're adjourned.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, you too.